There we go.
Hayden, my man. Ooh,
Hey.
you got the tank top on today. Nice.
Yeah, it's hot, so decided to go with it. So, as I'm sure you've noticed, I've made some changes to
Oh, I
chapter two again.
love the changes. Oh, I'm in love with what you did this week. This is the best. So it's funny
It doesn't
because
feel
I
like the
was just
best. It feels like
talking.
I made it a hot mess.
Well, great. Like if and that makes sense. Often artists don't have the perspective. I don't mean any perspective, but the perspective of the audience when they're creating something. I love this direction. I think it's the best direction you've gone in so far. I can't wait to talk about it. It's funny too because I was talking with a good friend of mine that I co-wrote a TV pilot once. She's just had her HBO film put on Disney, which is kind of cool for her.
Oh,
And we had this really fun conversation where she was talking. I thought of you immediately. She was saying this one section of the script she wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote, and she almost got rid of the script. Like she was like, "Oh, I just can't make this scene work." And she was working with somebody, her like a co-producer or something, and um, kept giving her feedback, and it reminded me like, "What about this? What about this? What about this?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just never going to do this." She says, "Well, just try one more time." And the thing she came up with next was so good, but she kind of had to. It's sort of like J.K. Rowling said years ago. She said, "Sometimes you got to dig through a lot of dirt to find the gold," and that's the hard part for writers because we want to be fabulous. I don't mean you. I just mean generally. We want to be fabulous and we certainly don't want to rewrite any more than we absolutely have
yeah.
to. But
I had to go
some of the
back and look
best
at the
stuff.
original material that made me want to write BPA just to figure this scene out.
Yep, I can imagine. Yeah, but it really paid off. Let me just pull it up here. Where are we? So, like I spent the whole time on Graveyard. I didn't even get to the other one here. Let me just see here. Perfect.
Just to confirm, I was able to convey that Matthias is a vampire, right?
Yep, I got that. Yeah,
Okay,
I
I
love
wasn't
that.
sure if I did enough there.
And I love like part of the the reality of writing is that we put everything out, all of our ideas out there, and then it's a matter of like writing. I've often made the comparison as like sculpture. Like anytime a person like creates like Michelangelo's David, that started with a big solid block of marble, and the artwork, to create the artwork, it's all about taking things away, right? And so writing is sometimes like that, where the key is like to trim things down, let the visuals speak for themselves, avoid too many adjectives or adverbs to describe. Like, for example, if Matthias says something with that sounds like sort of sickly sweet, it doesn't need to be followed by he said sick, with a sweet, like a sickly sweetness kind of thing like that, because it's so obvious in what's being said. So there are a couple of points where I suggested that you probably say more with less, but the general vibe of this so works for me. So I'm going to make some of this is just strictly suggestions. You can completely ignore them if you want to, but the direction that it's going in now is really cool. And so, and there's two ways you can go. Like part of the way you've written his conversation with her sounds like this is basically a midnight snack, although
Mm.
it's the longest midnight snack anybody's ever waited to do it. Or there's a thing about liberating. Like I love the way you go. This is your apotheosis. Like I thought, okay, here we go, and I thought this either works or it doesn't, and it totally worked for me.
Mm.
Um, so a couple of thoughts I have, like, and this is just tidying up stuff along the way that seems to make more sense this way. Now, of course, I remembered. How could you think I wouldn't have remembered our 1 year anniversary? Okay, so we've got one thing you got remembered, and remember. And so you just want to make sure that you're using different word choices, just those kinds of. But anyway, what I was going to suggest is, and this is suggestion. Of course, I remembered. How could you think I wouldn't remember our 1 year anniversary? And rather than, do you remember how we met? We met at the church. You were so pretty. And I know we've talked about these before. To me, I also wanted to go. You go, ah, babe, ah, you're sweeter. So there's another one where it's like three. I can't handle any more ahs. No, just a
Yeah.
reality of the response. So my thought might was along the line of course I remembered, and he pauses, he pulled out the blanket. From the first day we met, I knew you were special, like just trimming it up, take or leave that. But there was no one else in the whole world. That's when I knew I had to make you mine. Pulling out a blanket, and she like a response there because she hasn't responded. So if I'm just trying to think physically, we see how she feels, and then right when she says, yes, it's just creepy here, why did you pick this place, we don't have any reference to how she feels. It's just him. And so I was thinking this point, and I didn't put it in here, in response to him saying that, um it would really help, because you've done such a good job of describing how she feels going in there, and then suddenly that just gets switched off. So my thought here, that I knew I had to make you mine. Now, what I love, response could be, if I was any, being the reader or any other woman, I might go, make you mine. But she's so under his spell at this point, and that's another thing I love about you going vampires. I mean, I feel like I'm when I'm reading that going, oh, that sounds weird. But she doesn't notice it. She doesn't feel threatened by him saying, that's when I knew I had to make you mine. Because why would she?
You know, it
They've
just
been in a
occurred to me.
relationship for a year. What's that?
I could have just made this its own story, since this is basically like supernatural Law and Order. I could have
Ish,
just,
yeah.
because the story of this is basically this guy goes around trying to date girls and none of them turn out right. So instead of turning them into vampires, he turns them into ghouls.
Okay, so this is the problem that you have specifically, is that, and it's not a problem. All of the pieces of that you write for stories are so good. You're like me, because we're both amazing. You're like me, where every time when you write like, especially a chapter that is now taken on the life. This went from two people walked into a graveyard to, whoa, you're right. He's got a whole story here. She's got a whole story here. And every one of your stories, any given chapter in one of your stories, could easily be a breakout story. So my suggestion would be, make a list, but resist the urge to go in a new direction. I agree, because that's how good writing should be. Good writing should be such that any given chapter is so well written, so thoroughly baked. Like giving characters that we'll never see again a story that feels as if these are real people. That is writing. Usually, I hear all the time people say, "Well, I don't need to go into detail with these people. You're never going to see them again." I'm going to go, sometimes, yes, but the challenge is that that's what we all do. Say, well, I'm never going to see him again, so I'm just going to zip right through them.
Yeah,
No,
but
the
but
difference.
at the same time, like this is like an actual story that I could shove into a book and sell it. It's
No
not,
question.
which then makes the
No, you.
question like, should I like just shelve that for like, I don't know, chapter 4 or
Yes,
some shit?
keep that. I would keep this and then on the shelf, because that's always my perception, is that that's always going to be a problem that you have, because you are one of the richest world builders I've ever worked with. Sincerely, I mean that. Very few people that I've worked with, I'm talking from years back when you and I started working together, you've got the ability to like almost effortlessly create these really cool worlds that could easily like have 5 or 6 or 7 stories going on in them. And so you're going to have to, my experience is that probably you're going to have to constantly shelve it. I do that all the time. I'll be writing a story and then I'll write a scene. I'll go, oh my God, that's a whole movie in itself. Exactly what you just said. Boom, on the shelf. Because the challenge is, if a person keeps redirecting and going, they never finish the one story. So the biggest thing here is that you have gone to like the next level with your storytelling and going into characters, and you've created this. Of course, you've raised as many questions as you've answered. Oh my God, what's the deal with this guy? There's a couple more things you do that are even cooler. So my thought would be like, oh babe, you're so sweet. No, just incurably honest, or something like that. Like, rather than, oh, you're sweeter, there's something cool. He says, well, what am I going to do? You're gorgeous. What do you want me to say? Could you grab, then he goes into the grab, could you grab the food? This is great. I love the way you did this whole paragraph here. That totally works for me. Her last thoughts, how sweet it smelled before she went black. Now, here's where it gets really fun to me, because here's where I was like, okay, now
You know what's funny?
my, what's that?
The really cringy line in this, I ripped it right from Twilight.
Not surprised. Your apotheosis, this one there, you
No,
mean,
the
or?
personal brand of heroin.
Oh yeah, yeah. So, and I think people are going to tell that, from a
That
mile
was
away,
kind of
kind
the
of thing.
point.
But part of my thought is that, go further with the thing you just laid down. It's your apotheosis, your evolution beyond the transitory human form. I can easily see this guy next saying, like, I love her response, by the way. Matthias, what's going on? Nice, you leveled it out there. I love this. Tia, what are you doing? Stop! Get off of me! Let me go! Nice. He leans down and bit into her shoulder, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Like, that was like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. And it was so different than what you did before that I immediately loved it. I thought, okay, now it's on. As soon as he bites into her shoulder, boom, boom. The comment about apotheosis and the biting into the shoulder, I'm like, okay, where's he going? I like this. I can't let case. So one thing I thought might be good if he's just said, hey, I'm doing you a favor. Basically, it's just your
Yeah.
apotheosis. I'm
So
doing you a favor.
push on the superior racism act.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is pure, eugenics. Don't be upset. Most people wonder and dream about the next world. I wanted to give you the answer. I wanted to give the answer to you as a gift, the gift of immortality on our anniversary. Go back to the anniversary thing. He's doing this as a gift. Like, let's not fool ourselves. He's having lunch, right? But he's also creating, who knows? And this is what I love. Is he creating a member of his Dracula harem? Is he just having dinner?
Well, when a
Is he
vampire
like,
bites you, it has three options. It can insanguinate you. It can do a partial transformation into a ghoul, which is like the creatures we have running around. Or it can go
mm-hmm,
full on and turn you into a vampire, which has certain benefits in giving you adaptability to the head vampire's bloodline. In this case, he's a lesser
perfect.
vampire, so he can only turn her into a lesser vampire.
Absolutely. This is great. But the idea, like, I would just take that whole idea, it's your apotheosis, your evolution, go all the way with that. It says, look, I'm kind of doing you a favor, bitch. Right? Like
Hmm.
not that he wouldn't say bitch yet, because
Oh
he's
no,
he's
he's gonna
still
be
in the
the
thing.
whole formal Twilight roleplay bullshit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
I'll
will
be honest, I
transform
came
you
up
into
with this on
my
Monday. I kept banging my head for a week.
oh, it's great. I think you meant to say immortal rather than immoral.
Oh god damn
Queen of
it!
the night.
God damn autocorrect.
But you could also go, I shall be your king and you my queen. Go like I would play this up. I would go more into the sort
Dracula.
of Vlad Dracula kind of thing, right? Um,
And then later I'll do a high school episode where girls are disappearing, and it turns out there's this
mhm,
one guy who's a vampire and he keeps trying to get it right. He's like doesn't know what he's doing.
mhm. Now again, be conscious of the fact that this whole thing starts by giving us the entry into the graveyard from her point of view. We even get her feelings. She feels claustrophobic, and then suddenly from here on, we don't get anything about what she's feeling except, of course, when she gets knocked out, etc. Um,
Yeah, I've been
but
having
that's more
cuts,
physical.
rip and part stuffs in and out.
So, for example, like here's a thing. Like what I was waiting for was the switch over to how is she feeling as she's being bitten and killed. We see physically what she's doing, but I want to know how she's feeling. So something like as if in a dream she watched her blood drip from his lips. He leaned back and stared into her eyes, his body writhing orgasmically. You are so beautiful, or however you want to word that. And this guy, I don't believe necessarily she's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. So I don't buy it because this guy's probably killed lots of women. If he really feels that way, then my feeling is he probably would have said a little more before this,
Mm.
like as he's having dinner. Like, and plus to me, the savoring kind of thing. If a vampire, this kind of thing, he brought he brought a basket with food in it, but actually she's the food. So that's what's I love that. Laid out the thing. So to me,
Oh, I
how
thought
would
he was
somebody
actually.
want to
My plan was actually just how her turn. No, I didn't think of him as just eating her, but yeah, that works too.
fair? I mean, it depends on where you want to go with this, but to me, this is a beautiful evening meal. He's looked forward to here. By the way, by making him a vampire, here's what I love about you doing that. A year is nothing.
Hmm.
So now you've immediately solved the question I had last week, which was, God, a year is a long time to be setting that up. If he was just a human like psychopath or sociopath, a year's a bit of a stretch. If he's a vampire, a year is 10 minutes. Right. So
Well, assuming
it
he's that
makes
old.
perfect sense. But
I mean, he's a
yeah, and
lesser
you
vampire,
could
so he's
say
not
like,
that old. He hasn't even hit a
fair enough,
thousand yet.
but probably well, but if he's even close to that, or even has the potential for that time, is very different for him than it is for her. And you might even drop that because, well, wait a minute, like say the obvious. Wait a minute, we've been together a year. Like maybe you could do that, but in any event, this works. But the savoring it, like I almost wanted him to savor this moment because he's kind of rushing through this a bit. Like what's going
Well, to
on?
be
Like
fair,
he lays
I'm
her
rushing
down,
through it a
chomp.
bit.
Fair. So one thing you may want to play with, and I know this is spending more time in the chapter, but now it's fun. Now
Yeah,
it's a
I
hundred
expected
percent
that.
worth
I
it.
expected that when I changed to vampire. I was like, okay, I've got to change this. More time. Boo.
Um, Yeah, I'm not bothered at all. Like, because the great thing is you know where you're going to take your audience. You're about to have this wicked scene that's going to unfold. But I'm scared enough with the idea that this dude brought her there for this reason, and I think that's what this scene is all about. But then when things so drag it out a bit, drag it out where he's like, have just about to go at her kind of thing, almost like the scene from Reservoir Dogs. Have you seen Reservoir
Nope.
Dogs? There's a scene where a man is tied to a chair, a policeman is tied to a chair, and Michael Madsen, this crazy motherfucker, he's about to kill this man, but he's like, hoo, 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 hoo. He's got a gun in his hand, and he sort of dances around this guy, and the music's playing, and he goes up and he just cuts off one of his ears, and he keeps on dancing and things like that. And it's horrifying to see. But what would be boring is if he just killed the guy. That's boring. What's not boring is to see him drag it out and the dread and anticipation on the audience's part. And we think, oh my God, this is horrible. This is all about a man destroying a woman. And suddenly here come the creatures. And I love that. When she bites now that you've got him being a vampire, biting her and making her bleed, I'm going to make a suggestion that's a complete 180. And to me, it feels like it could work better with, instead of him saying, you fucking bitch, when she bites him and tears a piece of his face off, we think he's going to get mad, but instead he says, "Oh, that's the spirit." Like, this is foreplay for him now. This is sexual,
Especially
right?
considering he's going to heal
Almost.
from that in about 10 seconds.
And tell us that, show us that too. Like the idea that he does that and then, but the idea that instead of being mad, going, "Hey, you fucking bitch," which is what a man would say, a vampire would be like, "Now we're talking." Woo! Like, he would love that, and that would freak the shit out of me if you put that in there. I'd be like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is in a good way.
I should also mention that,
Now,
just as a heads up, in chapter 3, he's going to turn into a big old vampire. Like, think of him as like a big old werebat.
love it. I am turned on by that.
Yeah. And then he kills Watkins, and then Julius just comes in and owns him because he knows how to deal with vampires.
Now, here's what I don't know if this is what you're thinking, but oh my God, the most exciting thing that you wrote here in the whole thing was "get her." Now, for me, because that's when I realized, so hear me out on this one. I thought, oh my God, is he in league with these creatures that are in the graveyard? I thought, because at first I thought, get her, who's he talking to? And then I thought, oh, I really, really hope, because here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm just going to let me just say it, and then you tell me what you think. I love the idea that all of the creatures, however many there are in this graveyard, are under his control.
They are.
He's wearing some. Yeah, perfect.
That's what I was not surprising to anyone who knows vampires and ghouls. That's like a common trope.
So what I might say is
my
that
question was, should I keep with her like running into the crypt and then finding the ghouls there on the buried body, or should I just have them like come out of the woodworks and chase after her in a big chase scene, and she
I think
smacks some away
and
loses them? Yeah,
the only anticlimactic thing was that he says, "Get her," and then I'm like,
nothing happens.
And so I thought, what I thought would be good is get her, and then creatures begin emerging thriller style and go after her. Then when she's running at a frantic pace and goes into the crypt, she's running from them. And what I love, and I don't know, forgive me if this is sort of what you're imagining, if they work with him, my suggestion would be, and I'm only saying this because I just watched episode 2 of Sandman. My suggestion is his control over them could be a combination of his supernatural mind control and or an amulet that he has, which is an amulet, dual amulet, or something. It doesn't have to be an amulet. Something that is a combination of self.
Because he turned them.
Okay. My suggestion is, and this is the only logical bump I had, is that if he has something and this is every woman who reads this would suddenly love the story, because right now it's 100% nightmare for any woman reading this. But imagine with me if, totally apart from traditional lore, he has something around his neck that gives him, or something that he's wearing that gives him control, that she grabs from him, and that's what enables her to get out safely, and why they turn on him. Because that was the only thing I'm bumping on, is like, he has complete control of the scene. Everybody's on his team, and then suddenly they're not. What's your sort of rationale for why suddenly these creatures under his control turn on him?
I didn't. They didn't turn on him. That was never part of the plan.
Oh, so sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Who is attacking him
Oh
then?
no. Scroll back up. Scroll back up. Yeah, I didn't know what to write, so I just put in quotation marks chase scene, or should I have her try and hide? Because I realized I need to rewrite everything below that point.
Oh, gotcha. So that might be one suggestion because here's what I
I
was
should
going to
also
suggest.
mention,
Cut
even if they
right.
do turn on him, this is a guy who can flip cars, so they're going to be launched into, like, not orbit, but they're getting literally tossed out of the cemetery.
Okay. So however you do it, the one thing I thought that could be fun is, and again, love it, hate it. If there's something physical that he has with him that she's able to take from him to explain the turning of the tables, of course, Julius takes it from her in the next episode. Here's, or the next chapter. Here's the most important thing you're doing here, however you choose to play this out. If you do a thing where we see him sort of
Uh,
taking control of the graveyard
I have a
to
great
get
idea.
her, okay.
You can have an amulet that makes him look human, but when she takes it off him, he turns into the giant bat form.
Okay, sure. Well, and I like the idea that, that it could be some kind of a protective thing too that keeps her safe because she doesn't stand a chance in this environment. There's no amount of running or planning or plotting that gets her out of this alive, unless to me she has some kind of supernatural protection. I can't buy it unless you want to go through the explanation. That's the easiest. That's the Occam's razor easiest explanation, that she's taken something from him that forces him to flee or gets destroyed. Well, I don't mind the idea that they destroy him, but of course he's a vampire, so he can easily come back. The value of that, because here's the thing you've done now. Here's the thing that's very cool to me. Rather than just a graveyard where a guy kills a bunch of people and a bunch of ghouls show up, what did you tell us in the prologue? What you told us in the prologue was that supernatural forces are sort of roughly kept at bay, even though the explanation isn't completely there, but it was more in chapter one, I believe. What you showed us was that something has changed. Something has changed and shifted the balance. We're going to find out what it is, but clearly it's changed and things are starting to come out of the woodwork. The supernatural is starting to invade Earth a little bit more. This chapter now, with flipping him to the vampire, has the opportunity to reinforce that idea, because when Julie, all it takes is in the next chapter for Julius to show up and go, they're being more careless now. They're being more bold now. They're being more something now. Like, I mean, this is unusual. And Watkins, I would definitely have Watkins. Well, why is this? What's unusual about this? He says, well, they come out every once in a while, but you rarely see. Basically, what you have is the equivalent of a supernatural gang rape here. I don't mean the other creatures are raping her, but it's the equivalent of that. It's basically one guy has brought her here to have his way with her, and his posse, his gang, are there to make sure nothing gets in the way or that they can catch her if she runs. It's the most hard. Every woman, period, in my opinion, will probably read this chapter that way. And now what you've got a situation where, however you play this out, she escapes. Whether and it's got to be logical. To me there has to be something that she has that's somehow keeping these forces at bay, because a mere mortal would never get out of this graveyard alive, not a hope in hell, unless she somehow turned the tide. And plus that gives her something against him, because all I'm looking for is for her to somehow turn the table in the situation. Not just it sort of happens, but she does something to turn the tables. I love that idea. Every woman would love that. I would love that as a man. Plus, it opens up a conversation in the next chapter with that thing that she gives them to go, this isn't good. Julia says, this isn't good. Or something like that. Watkins like, wait, what do you mean it's not good? Don't you know what this is? No, what is it? It's story can go on from there. The fact that they're just coming out in public and doing this now, well, it's a graveyard. It's hardly in public, yeah, but still, it's out in the world of humans. I mean, this is they're not hiding it anymore. There's something about what just happened that wasn't just a fun scene that was scary and gory, but there was something story wise significant about what happened in this graveyard. This is different. This is different. Just like in the prologue, this is different. Um, so to me, you switching it to a vampire or a supernatural creature that normally wouldn't do something like this, at least, whatever the thing is different about this, the fact that somebody escaped alive, like this is maybe that's what's unique about the situation, is that Like have Watkins point out the obvious. Wait a minute. A woman, a human woman, was in a graveyard with a vampire and a bunch of ghouls. How the fuck did she get out of that alive?
Oh,
Good question.
remember, like in chapter 2, Watkins and Julius meet up with her, and then Watkins basically buggers off to the graveyard to solo it before Julius gets anything out of her.
Fair.
Yeah, so I can have him talk to Nathaniel about this because in the next chapter I have him called damage control, so Nathaniel can show up and talk to him about all this shit.
However you want to play it, and not to try to write your story for you, but to me that's what makes this ultimately what makes this chapter important to the story. Not just a cool chapter with cool things happening, but important to the story is that there has to be something unique about this. Otherwise it would be very easy for a producer, if it was a movie or a TV show, they go, so sorry, how is this scene pushing the story forward? Oh, it's not. It's just really cool, scary stuff. Yeah, no, that sounds expensive and it's not pushing the story forward, so we're going to axe it.
I was just gonna say
At which
save the cat moment for Julius.
yeah, maybe that might be enough to get it through. But then you could go back to the version of it you had before, and it would achieve that. That's part of it. That's part of definitely what this does is it sets up a moment like that humanizes Julius and makes us like him more. But it's also potentially the fact that you have this playing out. Your whole story is about how something is happening now that hasn't happened in the past, and it's only going to get worse, and Julius is going to have to stop it. So here's your golden opportunity. This chapter clearly,
I do,
to me at least, wants
yeah,
to do that.
I do have some ideas for this. First off,
Mm-hmm.
one option, Ashley, who is the secondary character we talked about. One
Yeah,
option is for Ramona to assume that persona, and this can be like an awakening in a moment where she gets superpowers or whatever, like powers arise out of
yeah.
no need.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
we,
yeah. Ramona was just a throwaway rape victim before. Now she has the potential. If she's been through this, think about what she's
well, I mean,
seen.
she was just turned into a vampire, so there's that, or attempted.
Yes. Oh, please bring her on board somehow. And she can shapeshift for a while where Julius doesn't know where her allegiance is, or she flat out joins the team or whatever. But I think Ramona, you just turned a throwaway character into something potentially really valuable to your story.
I have actually a couple of points I want to go over for the side characters on that. First off, um, quick question: does the idea of a vampire with powers of basically a mini sun sound interesting at all?
Mini stun.
Mini sun, because that was Ashley's whole stick. That she has like solar powers, sun, all that type of stuff.
Ooh, okay.
So vampire with that, yes, no, the rise of the red
Well,
sun or something.
here's what I love about it. What does everybody know about vampires in the sun?
They burn.
Um,
They have no
so
UV
the
protection in this universe, so they
yeah, the
burn
idea
fast.
that's more to your point. So the fact that a vampire, okay. The fact that you have, so yes, the idea that he says, "Oh, what's cool and unique about Hayden's story? What does he do that nobody's ever done?" Well, you know how in Blade, he's founded a way to be out in the sun. Hayden's taking it one step further. This vampire has managed to harness the power of the sun and use it to his advantage. I've never seen that before. That's cool. Plus, if your whole story is about how the supernatural forces are invading and flipping the script, I think that you've just created an opportunity not just for your vampire, but pick any trope, any stereotypical monster or being. What's their kryptonite? And then decided in this story, it's not their kryptonite anymore. What
Uh,
has normally worked against these creatures is now something they've learned to work with.
to be clear, in this scenario, she still has no. Her cells still have no resistance to UV light. She goes out in the sun without sunscreen. She's getting a sunburn. She stays out there long enough, and she's going to start actually burning.
Cool. But if the vampire that you got, like I hope you can use Matthias. Like that's another thing that they'll say it was great because this looked like just a casual scene between a boyfriend and girlfriend. Now, what you definitely, if you do that and you have Matthias, or him or whatever vampire has found a way to control and use the sun's power in some way, that's cool. That's different. Logically, I'm going to be curious to see how that plays out, but
Well,
I like
Ramona's
it.
whole stick is like the expansive fire magic, all of which
Mm-hmm.
she's technically weak against. She's weak. particularly fire, lightning, and solar are all her banes, which means she has no
Sure.
resistance to any of these effects and will suffer the absolute maximum amount of damage from each hit.
So I love that. So she's definitely been wounded. It seems permanently, and then I'm going to be, excuse me, curious to see what she does to bounce back from that, because everybody loves the underdog, the person who looks like they don't have a hope in hell. Suddenly they find some kind of ability that nobody else has. However you want to play that out. But what it does do is if you're going to give Ramona and Matthias that kind of a role in the story, now this chapter definitely wants to be longer at the beginning. Um, because I don't mean just lengthen for the sake of it. You don't have to do anything more than simply number one, get into her head and feelings more here as she discovers the truth about him. Don't give it to us at the beginning and then drop it. Keep us in her head. No, I don't mean only from her point of view, but because if she's going to become an important character and potentially yeah, now in this introductory chapter, which sets the whole tone for the characters, which 100% of books, when they first introduce a character, it's just a rule. If when you first introduce a character who's going to become important later in the story, the first time they're introduced is where you got to tell us more about them.
Okay.
So this is probably going to involve potentially, before they actually sit down, you're going to tell us more about her. You're going to tell us what she's thinking about Matthias and how, boy, this guy, she'd been with 100 guys before, not 100. She'd been with 2 or 3 other guys before. None of them seemed to care like he did. He had been so attentive. He'd always been there for her when she was sick. There was like, he would always, it was always at night, which was weird, but like it was, or however you want to play that out. But so in other words, probably another page or two added to the, at least to this opening, to because right now we go from I just met them to he's already attacking her through, at page 1.5. That might work if these were incidental characters that we're never going to see again, but because you're potentially now bringing them into a bigger role, we need more about them.
Okay.
So that's probably not your favorite part of my feedback, but it's going to pay off because it's a wicked scene, and the run through, her running through is probably going to, running around, that should probably be longer. Give us more of an action scene where we see her, because
have her quite literally smash some ghouls.
Well, because it's hopeless. Like it's inconceivable by any measure that she could possibly get out of this thing alive. She's outmatched. She's outpowered. She's defenseless. They're smarter than her. They're better than her. There's no way she survives. But if you can find out a way to have her flip the table on him, not only do you make the chapter wicked, but your audience is just thrilled. But she has to earn it. She can't simply suddenly, oh, she found a sword and stabbed the ghoul through the head. No, to me, that's why I'm sort of giving the possibility that if he has
pick up a
something,
metal rod or something and then just smack them, and then for some reason they go flying.
couple of those works. Yeah, I don't mind that she gets resourceful, but then again, if I don't know anything about her and she's just generic woman, those scenes work best if you lead me to believe that she's never heard a fly. She's the kindest person in the world. She's super gentle. I don't say those things. But then when she suddenly has to, like, she's like Ash in Evil Dead. She becomes Ash in Evil Dead, where suddenly it's like, the only way I'm getting out of here alive is by going a little Rambo. And that's what I want to see. I want to see not just her running like and running into a crypt and then just barely escaping. And I really think there could be value in the only way she can possibly, I mean, there's only so many things she can hit a ghoul with, and eventually she's still going to get killed unless she's able to grab something that's supernatural or magic from him that protects her. I don't think there's any way, and why wouldn't you do that? Potentially, right? Mm-hmm. So, and she gets out alive with it and hands it to Julius in the next chapter, which is what alerts him, to the fact that, oh shit, I haven't seen one of these in 70 years. Is he back? Could be that it links him to the guy, Matthias. It could be that it's simply, these guys don't usually come out like this and do this
on Earth because of how low the mana levels are.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, maybe it's something that normally is just some object, it's just a statue, but the fact that it's now able, like something switched it on. Something has switched this object on. Whatever it is, it could be literally anything, but make it organic to the story. And Watkins maybe at first doesn't, or whoever, whichever of them doesn't get it. Like maybe Watkins brings it to Julius, and Julius goes, "Oh shit, this is not good." Like that could be cool. He says, "What do we do with the girl?" I got to bring her back to headquarters and we'll figure out what to do with her then or whatever. So now she's gone from just somebody who gets taken to the local ER and never seen again to, and I love the idea that right off the bat, one of the main characters is like, it looks like mortally wounded. Like she's had a shit deal. Ramona's had a shit deal. She was viciously
I'd
attacked.
rather have her as a fighter because otherwise I can't really explain her getting into the BPA.
Sure.
Like
Well, she
police
could get,
officer
she,
or literally anything.
well, to me, there's two ways you get her into the BPA. One is that she's, secretly a ninja, or has some special ability, which is a little been there, done that. Or the obvious, which is she's been bitten by a vampire. Even if I don't know
Sure,
anything about her
but
or
here's
whether
the
she's a
question:
fighter or not.
if you're bitten by a vampire and then the shadow organization comes in and instantly recruits you and then sends you into a war zone, do you think you'll actually do well when you're competing against creatures of similar strength to you?
No, not a chance. But that makes more sense to me than she's already like.
Well, she doesn't need to be a badass. She just needs to have a role in law enforcement, like being a police officer or something, because that then gives them probable cause to make her an agent and not put her in like some other department.
She could be ex-military. To me, this woman is too stupid to be a cop. Like she's way too stupid to be like, that's the challenge. Unless you're going to, here's the way you can play it. Right now, the way she comes across is as gullible and naive. What you can do instead is you can show us that she appears to be gullible and naive, but when she grabs that thing off of him, she realizes like she doesn't just suddenly get spell of protection. She's also like wakes up. She's like, oh my God, what the fuck? Like maybe she was a badass. She could be ex-military. She could be a million different things. I'd cop maybe, but any one of those things. Um, because she comes across as so like sort of gullible and naive, rather than say, well, she's just gullible and naive, show us that when suddenly the spell breaks, she's like, what? That's cool. If suddenly we realize what the hell, then when they find her, she can still be hiding and terrified a little bit, but yeah, that's one way direction you can go. That she is already a badass when she comes to the BPA. You can also 100% go the other way with she's absolutely not badass. She's just now a vampire, which is a disability at first, and then a superpower next. But that's what you do in the stories. You show us why would they want her because she's tough and knows how to fight and all that stuff, maybe, or because like a lot of great stories like this, a power gets released. And she's, yeah, I want her on my team. Oh, sorry, you have a vampire who doesn't die and can like is super strong, but she's not ex-military, not an ex-cop. I don't fucking care. She's a fucking vampire.
But
Yes, I want her on my team.
vampires already exist in this.
But wouldn't you need one on your team then?
What makes you think there aren't
Potentially.
already members of the
Oh,
vampires
okay.
on the
I love
BPA?
that. All you're doing is making my case for me. So now she joins with them.
Yeah, but
Like any way you slice it. Go do what you want to do for sure. Either one of those works. If you want to make her a prior sort of toughie, do that. But don't feel like that's, here's what I'm saying. I don't want to push you in the direction of doing the other thing, but I want to let you know that's an option if you want. I wouldn't need her to be tough. In fact, I'm almost more interested if she isn't, but I'm totally cool if she is.
yeah, but my problem
You've
is how do I get her on the mission to Alaska? Because even if she like even if they want her just for super strength and shit, are they really going to send her all the way up to Alaska with next to no training whatsoever? I mean, they're
so
already
take
doing
that
that, but
logic.
they're transporting people from the people they're currently doing that to are ex-military, FBI, CIA. You know,
Which is why it's even cooler that she's not. Like you could go either way. That you're making a good point. Don't get me wrong. You are absolutely being logical. Of course, not in a million years would they send somebody out who hasn't been trained, which is exactly why they should. That's what stories do all the time. And you should have everybody object to it, just like you are. You should have a character in your story saying, "Are you insane?" This girl has never been trained. She doesn't know anything about all of those. So that this is another thing that happens in story development all the time. The objection turns into the opportunity. And it's good that you're fighting for the obvious logic of what you're saying. You're bang on 100% right. No, it makes absolutely no sense that they would take this girl up north, which is exactly why they should. Now it's just a matter of how do you make that make sense and make sure you have the other characters pointing out the obvious. This girl knows nothing. Or you go either way. Well, we just found out this girl's an ex-Navy SEAL and she's this and she's that and she's this and that. That works, definitely. It's really, really, it potentially borders on the cliche because that's always what writers do. Okay, so they just this vampire just happened to attack like an ex-Navy SEAL. Okay, I didn't know that for a year. Okay, right. Or like he chose somebody vulnerable, as vampires are wont to do, and lo and behold, this, gosh darn it, if this girl who never should go to Alaska ends up going, this happens again all the time. Why would you give a ring to a hobbit? Holy crap, you want to
Because
put somebody up against,
hobbits can't be corrupted by it.
now you're getting somewhere. There's something special about them that isn't the obvious, he's good with a sword and he's big and he's muscly. No, he's not. Everybody points that out about hobbits. Hobbits are the most, Boromir, all of them think it's insane that Gandalf ever would have entrusted a hobbit with the ring. What were you thinking? Why didn't you, Aragorn's there? You know where he is. Why didn't you give it to Aragorn? Why didn't you give it to this guy, to that soldier, that fighter? Why didn't you magically transform a Uruk-hai, right? You gave it to literally the least. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Don't point out the obvious, but you're right.
That is literally the most repeated thing in Lord of the
but
Rings.
that's the whole point of Lord of the Rings, is to intentionally put the least likely hero at the front of the army. And that's what makes it great. So that's why I'm saying I don't need her to be, it might be more interesting for her not, like, it's easy. Don't get me wrong. Yep. Oh, yep. She's ex-military. She's an ex-cop. That explains it. Great. Put her on the team. Yep. That's quick and that's easy and also been done about 1,000,000 times. Whereas if this girl is the, like, nobody,
instructor.
like, she's the last person to get picked for a soccer team and then scores the winning goal. Yep. Yes, please. That's what makes stories great. So, food for thought. It works either way. But you have just completely blown my mind this week. This was so fun to read. I think the idea of him being a vampire, being in league with the creatures, like the possibility that he and her survive and play later in the story, the idea that she,
they don't.
She only gets.
I'm killing him off so Julius can show off he's a badass.
Mm-hmm. Even if she's military or a cop, even if she can handle a few of the ghouls, I'm sorry, but the sheer volume of them and her having like, to your point, well, let's put it this way. You've sort of answered your own argument in a certain sense, because if she on her own is actually able to escape these people, these creatures in the graveyard, then hell yeah, I want her with me in Alaska. But because how did she do that? Of course she can go to Alaska, but more likely even if she was able to fight off some of them by chunking a piece of rebar through one of their brains or whatever else like that, there's just too many of them. They're too powerful. They're supernatural. So that's why I think there has to be an object that explains it. Or Julius comes in and saves the day, Expelliarmus style, right? Like, it could be that. But I like the idea that she earns it. She, not Julius or anybody else, in my opinion, she should be the one who gets herself out of it. But then there has to be some help that comes to her to explain how she could possibly turn the tide on these creatures. And get rid of them.
So that she became a vampire. We don't actually have to give her some magic item crap.
That's interesting. That can work. Yeah, maybe that they just leave her alone because she's now one of them. That's entirely what zombies won't eat a zombie, for that reason, right?
No, I'm saying, like, after all the shit show's done, that they have her in like an ambulance and they're examining her, and like, oh yeah, she's a vampire, so that explains how she got out.
Okay, but in the chase, the only thing that you're still left with is
scene. She just smashes any of them that get close.
I like that. That's brilliant. Yeah, if he thought that he was going to transform her, but she managed to escape, but now she's already starting to get mojo she didn't know she had before. Okay, go with that.
And
I
then she
love
picks up a
that.
ghoul
That's
and
a cool
tosses it
idea.
over a fence without even realizing it.
Okay, now you've answered the question of why would they send her up to Alaska?
Yeah, because she took out half the ghouls on her own by accident.
Because she just became the fucking Hulk,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Like,
Two
yeah,
questions. First off, should she not become a vampire, or should she just awaken like magical powers and become super strong and all that shit?
I like your idea. I don't know if this is what you were implying, but I like the idea that as she's running for her life, and assuming she assumes, and by the way, that would be a thought. You want to put something in her head. She started running knowing there was no hope in hell, excuse the pun, that she would ever get out of here. So, she did something, like she a ghoul came at her and she swatted at it, and thinking, that's it, I'm dead, I'm done. And suddenly she saw the creature she just swatted fly 100 feet into the distance, and she's like, what? And like, that's fun. If show her evolving already in the simple time it takes her to run away from these creatures, she's already starting to get these things. Yes, that gives you opportunity to get into her head, which we desperately need. It gives you a wicked chase scene,
Oh yeah.
and it sets up everything that happens next with her. But of course, Julius and Watkins weren't there to see any of this, so she herself probably wouldn't. She passes out at the end of this because she got low blood, vampire low blood sugar, or whatever. She just passes out of fear, and when they get her up, she just appears like a helpless little woman when they pick her up.
Yeah.
They don't realize what she is.
My question is though, is that at the end of all that, do we want to stick with the vampirism, or do we want to say, nope, she didn't turn into a vampire, she awakened something else entirely?
Ooh, I like that. Tell me what you mean. Like she's maybe she's a new version of something.
No, we already established this earlier in a character sheet. She has a disease called hero syndrome. The downside of it is that it effectively cuts your lifespan in half. The upside is that your body metabolizes magic so efficiently that you're basically a superhero.
Love it. Love it.
And then we keep the whole sun theme to kind of add on as to why she didn't become a vampire, because the disease.
So long as there's some logical like you've given, so long as there's some logical explanation, she had a disease already, and
between that
somehow
and her magical affinities, the disease became a little more than fuel for her awakening arcane powers.
And the blood of a like, you could easily say vampire. Okay, existing magical powers she didn't know about, plus disease that looks like some disease that we would put on a chart and say, oh, she's dying of this, plus vampire bite equals boom, a whole new thing we've never seen before. That's all you got to do, is make sure the audience understands, and the BPA and Julius understand how this could, but she just looks like a girl they have to protect. Like, that would be my suggestion, is for the whole next chapter, we see the reader, we saw that she got kind of hulky there, and what's that about?
Oh, yeah.
Julius and Watkins, when they find her, she's just a helpless little waif that they think they have to protect, and don't realize until they bring her back to the BPA and she gets mad and like throws an agent through the ceiling. Oh shit, right? You could do it like that. Maybe she's more than just a helpless.
The whole naive thing. She's just very strong and violent when it comes down to it.
She could be a Jean Grey, right? Like Jean Greyish in this regard. Jean Grey is capable of like crazy powers, but thanks to Professor X, she doesn't either know or remember or whatever else exactly what she has. And that's a Hulk thing too, where when she goes into rage mode, or whatever the case may be, maybe she doesn't remember it, or whatever the case may be. I love that shit. But you've just made her one of my favorite characters in the story.
My only question is it like story-wise better to have a vampire or not a vampire?
I'm good with it. Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling not to.
I'd rather not have her as a vampire, because I already have another character who is a vampire. Having two of them would just be too much overlap.
No, I love your idea that you've created. I mean, you've seen the Blade films. Have you seen the Blade films? Okay, so the second one, I love the second one most of all, because we thought we knew what vampires were in the first film, and suddenly you've got this thing that opens up its mouth and it's like, It's like a whole other level of vampire. But now what you're talking about is a whole other level of something even
of
more than a
human.
vamp. It's not a vampire. Yeah, I love that idea, especially somebody who doesn't manifest most of the time as supernatural, or magical or creature. They just look like the most, like you'd see her and forget about her three
Yeah,
seconds later. Those are my
without this event, she would have never awakened her powers.
yeah.
Not really, because she would have awakened her powers in a couple of years when like the world was flooded with magic. But you get the point.
So when she's walking now, here's what I would suggest you consider. When she's walking into the graveyard with him, she's just so darn grateful to have found a guy like this, because with her condition, it's been hard to find and get what symptoms. Don't worry about it right now, but symptoms can be, she's narcoleptic, that she has bad gas. No, don't do that. But I mean, it could be something that would be a deterrent for any other guy. Like, so she feels so gosh darn lucky
Her
that she
symptoms
found a guy who
are hyper energetic, a large metabolism that requires her to eat a lot of food, and
Mhm.
basically it's like ADHD and having a super high metabolism that requires you to keep eating huge amounts of food that makes it really expensive.
So I love all of that. So that all needs to come out in this chapter, in my opinion. But don't describe it as anything that the audience could interpret as supernatural. Make it sound like she's just a human. She's just a sick human being, or she's just a human being who's got a disability or a disease. And it just like, oh, this poor girl. I feel for her. She's found a guy. Like, no hint at all that she's anything other than just a sweet girl with a problem or disability or disease, and we're with her. Oh, I'm so glad she found a guy. It's hard to find somebody, and you're going to flip that immediately. But by doing that, you're telling us some stuff we probably need to know about her, and you're setting up later when she does get the bite and manifest later, it all comes together. You don't want to wait until after the bite to tell us about her disease or to tell us about these things. You got to do it beforehand, usually as a rule, so that we get that first plus vampire bite. That might explain what we're starting to
Any
see now.
idea for disease things?
Um,
Because at this point, the whole point of hero syndrome is that your body is working, is that you can get twice the power out of your body. But the problem is your body is now working twice as hard, so it's burning its lifespan twice as fast.
what's the disease that in Blade Runner the guy has that makes him age twice as fast?
No, she doesn't age twice as fast. She's just like
No, and yeah, I'm not saying you do. Yeah, I'm not saying you do that. I'm not saying you make it that, but I'm just saying that there's an example of a person who, his name is Sebastian. I'm not saying you have any connection at all to this story, but this character in Blade Runner, um, he's super, super, super intelligent, and unfortunately he's also got Methuselah syndrome that makes him grow old too fast, right? So what is the version of that for her? Like, it's a blessing curse. Her power is clearly a blessing curse, and she should, my suggestion would be they walk in here and she's dying. Oh, by the way, that's a perfect thing. And then Matthias can say, sweetheart, you're dying anyway. Like, it's so perfect what you're setting up here. Like, she's not sure, like she's walking in there and she's not sure how long she has to live. Also explains why she's not entirely uncomfortable in a graveyard, even though she says it's a bit creepy. Like, she looks around and she goes, oh, I won't be long before I'm here. Like, if you set
now
it
I feel
up
like
where
I
we
gotta give
think
her a
we're
second
getting,
disease to make this entire thing make sense. Because hero syndrome doesn't
well,
have other side effects beyond beneficial ones.
so any way yeah, maybe any way you slice it, though, the idea that you're setting up a immediately sympathetic character. I immediately like her simply because she's sweet and she's dying, or sweet and she's
That's gonna be hard
prone
because
to,
I can't
like,
give her cancer.
you could give her, you know what you could give her, though? You could give her a question mark that she thinks might be cancer. Stephen King does that all the time, and it's perfect. For example, the book Insomnia. He often has characters in the book Tommy Knockers and in the book Insomnia. He did that. He did it where you thought, because you're in the head of the main character, suddenly he can't sleep and he thinks, oh my God, do I have cancer? Do I have this? Like, what's wrong with me? Of course, he goes through the list of all the known diseases that actually exist. He wouldn't think, maybe I have, superpowers. No, he would think, and so would she. So, like, the whole idea, yeah, she can think, the doctors, she'd been to a dozen doctors. they'd done 100 tests on her and they still couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Of course they couldn't, because they have no idea what this is. So they think maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And so she, like everybody who's given a diagnosis like that, says, oh my God, I have this problem, right? And I would suggest you give it, I would lean into the idea that it's terminal. She has every reason to believe she won't live to see her next birthday, which not only makes her more likable and the whole thing that she gets cooler, but it gives the whole a vampire thought he was doing her a favor, even though he's still a dick and evil. He, at least that's how he's selling it to her. He says, look, sweetheart, you're gonna die. And that's of course why he picked her. It's part of the reason why he picked her. It's sort of like, well, she's dying anyway. Doesn't explain why he was in a relationship with her for a year, and didn't just find her and fuck her and kill her, right? But the idea that she is now she's far and away my favorite person. And what a perfect pairing eventually with Julius. Like, oh, the potential for her, if she is this person who turns out to be a woman everybody had kind of given up on, who suddenly comes alive when the perfect combination of things happens to her. And like you said, if she had never been brought into the graveyard, if she had never been bitten by a vampire, none of this would have happened. And she quite conceivably could have gone to her grave thinking, I have cancer. But this has woken her up.
Actually,
this has shaken her up and woken her up.
I have a great idea. So since Hero Syndrome doesn't really have any negatives, what if I make it so that Hero Syndrome, with no mana in her system, results in things like depression,
perfect,
lethargy, like all the stuff that makes your moves
slow. Crazy delusion, suicidal ideation, all of like go for the.
I'm gonna go that far. Just make the body weak as hell.
Sure. Yeah, like and the great tease, the great switcheroo you're doing is that when we first meet her, we assume, yeah, she's probably a girl who's sick and maybe has cancer or has whatever you want to give her. It's not occurring to anybody though. Maybe she's got latent supernatural powers and just needs the vampire to bite her to awaken that. That's what you're gonna do. But we don't have any clue that's happening. So we just think she's sick with a disease we know.
Okay. Two more things. One of the things is a change in power set, because while I do like the sun thing, I've also noticed if we're going for like a Law and Order supernatural, like X-Files type thing, it's not exactly subtle in any way.
In what way do you mean?
Like if I give her like sun powers, then that's not subtle. Shooting lasers and setting shit on fire isn't exactly subtle.
I don't have any specific ideas now, but I might later.
I do have one, and that is to go for a nature angle. And we can give her like a grass sword that can cut with wind magic. We can give her basically every Pokemon grass type attack. Solar beam, leaves that can cut through metal, armor made of bark.
Well, here's what I love about your grass sword thing like this. She, so far, the way you're writing this character is
exploding mushrooms.
The least likely person for me to look at in a story and go, that person's going to become important to the story and maybe turn the tide. In the same way that we don't, a hobbit, we're seeing that with her. If she becomes the hero, if you will, not a superhero. She becomes the hero who takes things in our natural world that we think are nothing and turns them into powerful things, like herself. So if she represents a person who we would never assume was ever going to amount to anything, and then she grabs weapons, like I would run the gamut. She can turn water into a deadly thing that can kill people. She can turn, grass. What's grass? Her secret weapon is she knows how to turn things that look completely harmless into weapons of mass destruction. And what that does is it also gives me hope from that point forward. Okay, because what you're going to do is you're creating this world where things just get worse and worse and worse, and we think, oh, we're fucked. The supernatural forces are going to take over. We're all doomed. But she is the ray of hope, because if she and a blade of grass can turn into a force to be reckoned with, what are the other possibilities? I love that for what she represents, and now you just made one of the best characters in fiction, because you've taken what we know about her thematically and you've carried it logically forward into everything she does and everything she thinks. So it's not just a one-time gimmick. Oh yeah, this nobody turned into somebody, but she does that with everything and everyone. She could become a source of inspiration for people who think there's no hope. She herself is an example of hope.
Okay.
Ooh, you give me chills. There's all kinds of possibilities
So
here,
you're
man.
okay with
I love
plant
it.
powers, exploding shrooms, grass
Yeah.
swords, bow and arrow. Also, that means you can get
Yep.
into alchemy with Julia, so that's nice.
Absolutely. Um,
Poisonous arrows and can create her own wooden.
and she's tapping into the power of the world they're needing to save it. Like not and that doesn't seem like a fake, environmental thing you're doing. It seems to make sense. So yeah, I'm big into that. And it doesn't look like poison ivy. It doesn't look like you're tapping into the best traditions
It
of
is a bit
all
like
kinds
poison
of
ivy,
ancient
except
stories.
like more Pokemon battles poison ivy.
Yeah, yeah, she's not, so long as her personality doesn't turn into poison ivy, then of course using nature, she's not the only one who does that. Literature and movies are full of
Talking to
different characters
plants,
who,
teleporting through trees.
yeah, absolutely, all kinds of stuff. She has a beautiful, but I think the issue, the thing there to me that's interesting is not simply that she uses nature, but she uses things in nature, and for that matter she could use things, everyday objects too, and turn them into, weapons of mass destruction, because she doesn't underestimate things. She spent her whole life being underestimated by everybody ignores her, turns a blind eye, tries to take advantage of
Or
her.
she's just
She is that
underdeveloped and acts out like a child. Grass sword.
Yeah,
Ching.
absolutely. Yeah, the power of her imagination, like that's okay. You're in fantasy, so you can do it where,
Well,
like,
my
what,
entire thing
man,
originally
what,
was the character who had the nature powers had no imagination, so it took him a lot of work to get there.
however you want to play it
In
out.
this case,
I love
I
it.
think I'll just go with Ramona. Ramona being quasi Gaia and using childish imagination to mushroom bombs, grass sword, plus poison, bows and arrows, all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, no, it's totally turning me on. I dig it.
Hmm.
No, your whole story just came alive this week, so I'm curious to see what you do with it.
Okay, so to confirm, Ramona's more or less kind of an airhead. Not stupid, but she's naive, childishly so. She thinks she's sick, gets bitten by a vampire, and awakens to her true powers. Beats the crap out of some ghouls. Meets Julius. Watkins runs off and gets killed. And that's what we're doing so far.
Yeah, and the only thing I would do on the naive thing is that naive or under his spell,
Hmm.
which would make complete organic sense to me. And tragic backstory that she finds out is going to find out is not tragic at all. It's what makes her uniquely gifted. It's like autism. It's like when we thought, 5 years ago, even 10 years ago for sure, if we found out somebody was autistic, we would be like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. God, how are you going to manage to, because we thought it was a disability. And improperly managed, sure, it could be. It could also be a superpower. So society's opinion shifts. She is the underestimated character. She's the one, again, I like her because she's the kind of person that everybody would underestimate and ignore. And those are the deadliest people in the end if they ever find a way to turn it around, because nobody sees them coming. Nobody expects what they unleash. And that's what's interesting to me about her.
Mm-hmm.
So naive or under his spell, martial arts or military or police past, or
I think I'll just
absolutely
skip all
none of
that.
that.
Yeah, just make
Yeah.
her a yoga instructor, like some guru with Earth,
Because then what does she do? She goes
or
to
maybe
the
just have her
BPA and,
just maybe have her just live with her mom because of her disease.
yeah, and she doesn't have to be a yoga, but whatever it is, live with her mom. This is great. And this is what's great about Nate. Now, when she goes to the BPA, what do? They underestimate her. Like she's always experienced. Ah, she's a victim. Let's bandage her up and send her home, because they don't understand what they have. And that's been her whole life. That is her. If I was to make an X-Men film, that would be her. She's almost invisible, but she's just the person who quietly lurks through the room. And it was like Agent Coulson forever in Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
Like it says, who is he? He's just a guy who shows up to give announcements, and then suddenly he busts loose, and we're like, holy shit, who saw that coming?
Mm-hmm.
Only she's way less than that. She is lesser than. She is the person nobody takes seriously. She's going to save the world potentially, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She's Frodo.
Not quite. She's actually useful.
I won't tell Frodo you said that. Okay, I got to run to my next one. Great work this week, man. I've sent
No problem.
you notes. Next week, am I still here? Am I in New York next week? No, I'm still here next week. So I'll see you on Monday.
Okay.
Take
See
care,
you
my
on Monday.
man.
Bye.
Sounds good. Have a good week.